this is Tony Farrell and I've with me Chris Coverdale, and we met Chris 2 weeks ago in the House of Commons in front of Austin Mitchell and MP John Hemmings, didn't we?
Indeed.
And we met yesterday for the first time in terms of having a discussion together, and the main thrust of that discussion was the illegality of wars and the potential and the compulsion really to withhold all taxes in protest. So we had an interesting discussion. So I just wanted to explore that issue, because you've campaigned against this for many years, haven't you?
Yes. Basically, just to summarise where we've been at, I found out in 2002 that there was this thing called the International Criminal Court Act. And I started to look at it in detail, and by about August, September 2002, I realised that what was happening in Afghanistan and what was threatened to happen in Iraq would be totally unlawful, in breach of sections 51 and 52 of the International Criminal Court Act. And I thought, well, it's only just been passed. Tony Blair introduced the legislation, and it came into effect on the 1st of September 2001. And I was surprised that these were very serious criminal offences introduced into English law, into the law of England and Wales. The crimes were crimes of genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes, and conduct ancillary to these crimes. And I thought, well, this is the law of England and Wales. Why isn't anyone upholding it? So I started to investigate that and started to take action. I wrote to the Metropolitan Police, I wrote to the Commissioner, Lord Stevens at the time, and so on, and started to take action to try and get someone to uphold what I see to be the most important law that we've ever passed. And I've got absolutely nowhere. In the last 10 years, more than 10 years now.
Just blanket ignored you?
Yes, I mean, basically it has always been, we've had more than 300 approaches to the police in the last 10 years to raise the issue of, we have evidence that our government is breaking the criminal law, committing crimes under the laws of war, and we must uphold them and enforce them. And that's the job of the police, the Crown Prosecution Service and the judiciary, is to uphold the law. Now, of those 300 and something attempts, 5 of them have got as far as the Crown Prosecution Service. And what happens is that the police, there's a unit called the War Crimes and Crimes Against Humanity Unit at Scotland Yard. And when the police get a complaint of a war crime, it has to go to that unit to investigate it. Now that unit did its best not to investigate various things, but was forced to because of a useful incident that happened at Marylebone Police Station. However, as a result of their investigation, we had about 15 hours of giving evidence, all the evidence we have collected, that crimes of genocide have taken place in Afghanistan, Iraq, and since then in Libya. Crimes against humanity, war crimes, and conduct ancillary to those. It took about 15 hours to go through the evidence, and when the first hour or so, they were pretty dismissive. And you could see, oh, this is just another peace activist following his nose, if you like. But after they had considered the evidence that we put forward, they started to realise, well, there is something in this. There is this law, and it is quite obvious that it has been broken. So they put all the information to the Crown Prosecution Service, and they spent about a month looking through it. They kept giving me feedback, well, they've still got it. Then I discovered that the first woman who had been in the Crown Prosecution Service responsible for the thing had been moved on and had been passed on to another prosecutor.
Yeah.
And finally we got a letter after about 4 months saying, no, we're not going to proceed with proceedings against Blair, Straw, Hoon and all the rest of them, on the grounds that you have not provided evidence of intent to commit genocide, or evidence of intent to engage in crimes against humanity, or evidence of intent to commit war crimes. Now, I find this very strange because we have provided masses of evidence of intent, and so they'd obviously just ignored it or lost it or something. And secondly, it is not up to us to provide the information, it's up to the police to investigate this. We are the members of the public reporting the crimes. And the police had certainly got a lot of evidence from us, which has somehow got lost. And finally, this issue of refusing to initiate proceedings on the grounds of the mens rea, the intent. Intent has to be decided in court. It's up to the jury to decide whether someone, if someone's charged with murder and they're pleading manslaughter, for instance, the jury has to decide, did this person deliberately kill the victim? And exactly the same applies for genocide. Did Tony Blair and Jack Straw deliberately and willfully intend to destroy members of the Afghan and Iraqi national groups? And that was really the question that needed to be put to a jury in a case.
And if you had to summarise why you believe that to be the case, that they did deliberately commit genocide in their instructions for us to go to war, what would be the main arguments they would use?
You have to go back to the legislation. So that genocide, there are 4 elements of the crime of genocide by killing. In the legislation, the statutory instrument specifies those 4 items. The first one is that members of a national, ethnic, racial or religious group have been killed. The perpetrator has killed them. They are members of a national, ethnic, racial or religious group is the second one. The third one is to do with the intention. It was intentionally done. And fourthly is to do it as part of a widespread strategy or policy, basically. Now, if all of those 4 elements are in place, then a court has to convict somebody of genocide. And so what we were saying was all the others are in place. We know that they have fired cruise missiles into Kabul or Baghdad. And in doing so, knowing that a cruise missile will land, explode and kill anybody in the vicinity, you do not do that unintentionally. It's not an accidental death, it is an intentional death. If you didn't want to intend to kill somebody, you hand leaflets to them or you negotiate with them or something. You don't fire cruise missiles at them. And so there was a lot of evidence of intent to commit genocide. And it's actually, a lot of people misunderstand the crime of genocide, but it is laid out very clearly in the legislation, and that's the important bit in a sense. If we're going to charge somebody with genocide, we must go by the criteria that are laid down, elements of the crime laid down in the legislation.
And in the closing of ranks in the judiciary and in the police service, when you confronted him with this evidence and the legal arguments, why do you think, can you speculate on why you've had such a response?
I think there's sort of 3 different reasons. The first reason is that for 50 years at least, we have been, the whole public in Britain, the armed forces, Parliament, the media, the judiciary, the law enforcement authorities and so on, have been misinformed about the laws of war. We have been told that it's lawful if it's authorised by the UN Security Council. Now that is absolute rubbish. I've now studied the laws of war for the last 10 years, and it is absolutely clear to me that it is in law. War was outlawed in 1928. It was confirmed to be illegal when the UN Charter was raised place in 1945 and confirmed by the Nuremberg War Crimes Tribunal in 1946, when they convicted Germany's leaders of invading and occupying 11 nation states. They did so on the grounds that they had breached the Kellogg-Briand Act, and that's the treaty signed in 1928 by all the major nations, which says we renounce war as a political tool, and we will settle all disputes peacefully. And the Germany's leaders were actually prosecuted and convicted on the grounds that they had breached that 11 times during the Second World War. Now that's precisely the same crime that Bush and Blair and others committed. Now I think it's that background of not understanding the laws of war and believing the government when they say, there are terrorists out there, we've got to go and deal with them. Nobody understands that you cannot deliberately go out and kill a person. That has been unlawful since 1948, totally unlawful. Any person. And it's in that background of not understanding the law and constantly being told the wrong law by the government and by the Attorney General and others, most people go along with it.
We mentioned yesterday the potential of targeting the newly elected police commissioners, yes, who can hold chief constables to account.
I think it's a very good idea.
Yeah. What I want to do though is turn our attention to the public and the public's attitude, because there was some momentum in Stop the War campaign in 2004, 2005, and there were marches on the streets, but all that seems to have evaporated. Yes. And there really isn't any great vocal calling to stop or aggressive foreign policies in the Middle East and the wars that we're involved in, and that obviously disappoints you and I. But have you got an explanation why you think that's the case, why the public interest has actually dwindled?
Again, I think this is, yes, I do have, my feelings are, I have been involved with the Stop the War Coalition, and what they achieved in February 2003, getting 1 million people out on the streets of London, was a fantastic achievement. But there were so many people then really keen to stop what was going on. But they have focused entirely on marching, demonstrating and protesting. And it's rather like a group of people standing at a railway crossing, shouting at the train to stop. You know, you just know it has absolutely no effect whatsoever. Mm-hmm. And if you do it over and over and over again, never having any effect at all, everybody's just going to, oh well, you know, it's a waste of time, this. And that's really why we have to take a different approach. We must start to go down the legal route, mm-hmm, the financial route, the political route, rather than marching, demonstrating and protesting, which has no effect on government policy.